Hello, this is Gerald Hildenvos. Every word has coordinates of letters that will describe and can be understood as a description of things that are related into a context that has a geometrical idea that you can see, okay, I know where more or less where it is and where I'm concentrating upon. That's the first level of understanding, is that spatial reference. But certain things that should be described with words also have a time frame. So when you have these time frames, it's a slightly different approach. But you can also recognize that where do we need time and so on. And the last kind of category of orientations is about context. What kind of context do I have? That I have a certain movement as well, not just a direction and a place, but a continuous change of placement and of directions with a certain behavior that you can recognize. That's the context. It's described what are the conditions and you make a definition. Then you can place that somewhere, or you can place it somewhere in a place or in a timing. These are the three sorts of categories that we also use to pinpoint actually the letter positions, which makes a puzzle that makes up the word signification. How does that come? So it's quite simple that we orientate ourselves with all the things, just like we orientate ourselves in space, in that way that it almost goes automatically that we have always a certain reference in space. Same thing like we always have references of behaving ourselves towards something in a timed frame and so on. So these things are used by association with the letters, the way how we hear them, the way how we hear these signals, if they really remain in just a very strong point of reference with movement, or with a full behavior that actually is less clear where it has an effect. So all the words can be described with these elements, even quite abstract words like, for instance, state. And state has different meanings. You have the state, which is used for a part of a country, which has a certain defined state as well, with a state of condition. That's the second meaning also. So the state that also leads to a word like statement. So it's a kind of definition. So what do you have in these different meanings? You have that placement of that country then, which is then from the first category, so it should be with letters from that first category. It is a placement of something in the physical realm or the spatial realm, where you say, okay, here is the area. The state itself also has conditions, which has a timing involved as well, that you say, okay, no, but it has a certain, it works, and it works itself out from here to here with these conditions. But the conditional definition that makes a state, or that will make that statement, or that will state it, is from the third category. So all these words should be, all these letters from these three categories should be involved, and that's indeed also the case. And it starts with these conditions, and that's of course also logical for the word state. It states first its conditions, and then only it can define a place and also a certain time that it has to work itself out. And that will be the case with the letter choices that we have here, and you have them here in the right positions, A, T, E also, and then the S. So let's point them into the right positions and into the right order. The S as the first letter is one of the last category, so it means that we're going to take out certain qualities or a definition from all the things that are or are there all the time, from the materializing world, how everything is there in the background. Potentially we will use the letter S, and S is the last letter in that system. It is, let's have a frame where we can have our definition, our frame in a time and spatial reference that says, okay, here's the time is right, here you have it, and in these conditions you have it. So these are the conditions defined by the letter S, means this is the last letter. It finalizes itself by definition of it has the right effect, it will have a certain effect, it has a certain influence. Combined with the letter T, T is a position in space. It will leave that impression to us. It will leave that impression to the place and placement. T can be anywhere in that vertical position in space. That's the theory. It says where it is and where it is the association made. How is it come also? Because if you also have the frequencies of t, it's like you have a sudden idea. Oh, okay, here's a certain space, and I can recognize something maybe there at that point. That's the letter T. How we hear it, how we associate it in a certain functional position, also where it is. We have a small space left there where we say, okay, from here on I have distinction. I can distinct something into my spatial realm where I find my fixed points in space. That's a theory, and that's how it has been applied. So we have an influence with conditions that has an influence on a place or placement. The next letter, A, as a written letter, is on the horizontal plane. It says I have something to start from, my foundation, and this foundation is also there at the same time during this whole event, of course, because I already have st, which are the framed conditions which are limiting itself to a place, but it is expressed as A. So A is just says it just isn't limited to an expression to a place, but also to a range of a certain timed frame as well in that place. So I will also design it there that the A is about that position, which also deals with a temporal condition. And that's where it's referring to, again, to the letter T. It really goes towards that influence at that place where we have that temporal condition. With E, it also says, and that during a certain time, how it forms itself, how it also expresses itself, how it has its influence, its initial influence, and also express itself during that time process of changes that will appear there at that place. So you're having combination in state actually that restricting influence of S, certain starting point with a functional placement that you say, okay, here is a functional condition from that with a restricting influence. I have my starting point where I can work with, and it has its own time frame where I can follow it up. Actually, that's more or less the basics actually, and it very much focuses on what we have at this moment in T, at this moment now, where the preconditions, what I think of it from the past, or what we were going to make from it in the future. I could place these things as well, but it's very much in between this zone how I will define it. These things are almost, I could not say mathematical, but they are almost technical how I express them here, but these are the definitions also of how we see state. It's a state conditioned influence within a certain space and within a certain time frame that we also define this, and that's what not much more is expressed actually with this word, but you can understand it by also adding the placements, adding the timings, and adding the kind of limiting frame that we have there in the end with the letter S. That means that it is predefined at a certain place, within a certain way because that's the starting point, it's a predefined thing, even though it is more predestined as with a focus towards what I can make from it towards the future. Something like that. That's the kind of logic that you can use to understand words, even when they are quite abstract. Of course, you can't prove them so well with abstract words, but you can understand why these letters are used. I want to give an example of such an abstract word as well. Thanks again for watching. Bye.